I saw an ad for PF Flyers sneakers and I got really excited and nostalgic. And as I thought about it, I realized I had no business becoming excited or nostalgic about something that I'd never owned or even seen before. So, we're going to talk a little bit about this brand, its history, why and how it lives rent free in my head, or apparently had been for a long time. We're going to look at the shoes, what I like about them, some of the things that I don't like about them, and that'll be our discussion for today. So, hey, this is Fading Glory. We're a denim-focused men's fashion channel for guys of a certain age. And, I really think that, yeah, we're denim-focused. This is not denim. But, man, what goes better with a pair of jeans than a pair of these canvas and rubber sneakers? So, let's go ahead and take a closer look at these and see what we see. Okay, so PF Flyers. PF Flyers as a company started in, I think, 1933 in Akron, Ohio. It was actually a partnership between the guy that owned or invented the posture foundation insole. He has a US patent on it. And BF Goodrich, who used to make tires. They're a rubber company, and they actually used to make and manufacture these shoes and some other rubber related products. By the way, BF Goodrich doesn't make tires anymore. They're a brand name that are owned by Michelin, who makes tires under that name. But anyway, so this shoe is, and this company is really kind of interesting from the perspective of kind of their place in the in American shoe history, if you will. At one point, PF Flyers was one of the most popular athletic shoes on the market. And I think they owned like 20% market share for all American footwear. So, really big company. That seems like that would be a viable reason why, I knew about this brand and why I was nostalgic about this brand. They were everywhere, but they weren't everywhere at all times. In fact, even though they were really, really popular in the 1940s, they even became part of some official U.S. military uniforms in the afterwar period. But anyway, through the 40s and the 50s, really popular, and then they kind of started crashing and burning in the mid 60s, late 60s, which is when I was born. And by 1973 or so, they had pretty much ceased operations. In fact, they had ceased operations. So, because I was born in the mid 60s, that means that they were on their way out about the time that I came into the picture. And before I even became brand aware at all, like when you're a kid, 10, 11, you might know you're wearing Wranglers or Levi's or whatever. But by the time I developed any brand awareness, certainly these were gone. So I'd never owned a pair of PF Flyers. I had never, even seen a pair, I don't think. Okay. So where did this knowledge of the brand and again, this nostalgia come from? Well, it could have come from the fact that PF Flyers was actually the first shoe company to ever do any sort of a sponsorship deal with a professional athlete. There's a guy named Bob Cousy, he's a NBA legend. He played for the Boston Celtics. And again, they were entwined. And I'm from Boston, so maybe that's it, but it really isn't because A, I don't watch basketball, not really into it. And B, Cousy, even though I've heard of him, Cousy left the Boston Celtics in like the early 1960s before I was born. So it couldn't have been that. PF Flyers also sponsored the Johnny Quest series of cartoons. But I didn't watch Johnny Quest. I don't think that was part of my Saturday morning lineup. And in fact, I know it wasn't part of my Saturday morning lineup. I finally figured it out. And I've always been a big reader. And one of the things that I've read, in fact, I think I read all of them up into maybe all of them. I don't even know when they stopped writing them, but was the Hardy Boys Mysteries. And the Hardy Boys wore PF Flyers. In fact, I verified that independently during a recent trip to the library. But yeah, so the Hardy Boys wore PF Flyers. They were mentioned in several of their books. And what's really interesting about that is that this wasn't actually PF Flyers working with the people who published Hardy Boys to try to do some brand insertion. It was actually a tactic on behalf of or by the people that wrote the Hardy Boys mysteries to really paint the Hardy Boys as sort of young, athletic, detectives, right? So it would be kind of like if today you took a character and maybe you, I don't know, maybe you put him in Jordans, right? Here's somebody lacing up his Jordans. He's athletic, etc. So PF Flyers was so important during that time in America that they other folks would actually use the brand to lend a level of authenticity or particular traits to their character. So again, a storied brand, an important brand, but as I mentioned, by the mid 70s, they were out. They'd gone out of business, ceased operations. Sometime later, some other companies bought the brand, bought the rights, and then Converse owned them for a while. This is an interesting part of the story, by the way. At one point, I believe again in the early 1950s, there was a Canadian badminton player named Jack Purcell, and he actually designed some of the shoes for PF Flyers. When Converse bought the brand and owned it for a while, they then sold it but kept the Jack Purcell branding. And those Jack Purcell shoes are actually still available today, still from Converse. They've never gone out of production. I'll drop something here, but they actually look like really cool shoes. They don't look like they're even horribly priced. So I'm going to actually grab a pair. Maybe we'll do that. We'll talk about them in a later video. But anyway, PF Flyers. So that's kind of a real quick rundown of the history and mystery solved. Hardy Boys mysteries. I've read all of them. PF Flyers mentioned, and that's why I was nostalgic about something I'd never had before. So there you go. Now, for the shoes themselves, first of all, I am not a shoe expert. I can't really talk too much about the construction techniques of the shoes, but I can tell you that I've owned these shoes for a couple of months now, and I wear them fairly regularly because, and so I'll talk about them from that perspective. First of all, one of the reasons I wear them regularly is because they look good. They're just a good looking shoe. I'll try to maybe pop some shots of me wearing them with some jeans and whatnot, but they're a great looking shoe and they are just slipper comfortable. They are, I mean, they're just eminently wearable. You throw them on and you feel like you're wearing a pair of slippers. I mean, they are literally that comfortable. In terms of the shoe themselves, they have what you probably remember from like Converse All Stars. This rubber toe cap and this back. The reason I mentioned both this back stripe and the rubber toe cap is because this is actually part of a trademark dispute back in the day, and PF Flyers actually wound up winning that dispute, and they were able to use these design elements. Really nicely branded here on the right-hand side. I guess that's the right-hand side, yeah. Maybe the outboard side, because in the left shoes, it's on the other side, right? But and by the way, this is a pair of shoes that did not come right out of the box. Like I said, I've had these for a couple of months, with the exception of maybe taking just a little something to kind of wipe off the side here. I haven't really done anything to them, but they're holding up really well. Like I said, they're super comfortable. The canvas seems like it's good quality. The lining is like this sateen sort of a type lining, and so it's very, very smooth, and I said very comfortable. So I really like the shoes. One of the other things that I like about them is that both the lining and the insole are actually branded. And again, that's not like a big deal, but the fact that they're not just using something generic that they're buying and just throw it on there, they're at least taking if they don't make this stuff themselves, they're at least buying it from somebody that they're paying a little extra to have some branding. And I kind of like that. So yeah, they're very comfortable, and they're a really nice alternative if maybe you just don't want to be somebody wearing just another pair of Converse, right? They are unique enough. I've actually had a couple people say to me like, "Oh, what are those?" You know, I never saw that before. So, but yeah, like I said, everything about them is comfortable. Everything seems like it's really well done. There's some additional stitching up here at the end of the lace area, which again, I'm not a shoe expert, but that just kind of speaks to, you know, a little bit of care in construction. Like I said, I've only had them a couple of months. I've worn them. I think I wear them fairly regularly now because they are just so comfortable and go with everything. But you know, like I said, I just think that they're really nice. Now, some of the things that I don't like about these shoes is really only two. One of them is the fact that, and I guess New Balance owned this brand for a while. When New Balance owned them, they actually made them in their factory in Massachusetts, or made some of them in their factory in Massachusetts. And PF Flyers reintroduced just a few years ago, but they're reintroduced by another brand and they don't make these in the US. And even though that's not like a huge slam, I don't know, I kind of think it'd be cool for a storied American brand to make shoes in the US, or at least some shoes in the US. So that's one thing, it's not a big deal. The only other thing that I really don't love about the shoes is that the tongue of the shoes themselves is not secured all the way down. In fact, the tongue is only secured down here. So it's not secured anywhere here along the sides. And so what I've noticed is that over time during the day, the tongue will actually slide over, and I don't know if you can see it so much in here, but it will slide over. So like, you know, see my fingers are right there. You'll see like your sock color poking through. It just doesn't look great. And like I said, the tongue does have a tendency to migrate to one side or the other. I mean, it's a big, you know, I should say it's not a big deal, right? It's an easy fix. You just grab it and pull it back over. But I kind of wish that maybe instead of the tongue just kind of, you know, flopping down there, maybe it provided almost a more sock-like experience. And again, I'm not a shoe expert. Maybe that's something that they can't do for one reason or another. Might get in the way of something else. I don't know. But other than that, these are really, really nice shoes. I really like them. And they're also not horribly expensive. So I don't have a relationship with PF Flyers. They don't know I'm making this video. They certainly haven't given me any money or even any free shoes. I did buy these on sale where I got like, I don't know, 40% off my second pair or something. So I have a pair in white. I'll drop those in here as well. But I really like them. And I think that for the price and for what you get, they are a solid, solid deal and a super comfortable, well-made, well-crafted shoe. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you the next time.